Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, June 12th, 2023. And I'd ask that everyone present please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Elgott, will you please take the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Badkins?
Here.
Mr. Brado?
Here.
Mr. Olgiati?
Is asked to be excused.
Mrs. Rose? Here. Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. Witt, excused. Mr. Burkowski?
Here, thank you. Next, it would be in order, our clerk is at a conference for the Michigan Clerks Association, so the deputy clerk is here, so I would look for a motion to appoint Ms. Terry Selgott as the acting clerk.
So moved.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Brada with support by Mrs. Rose. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And thanks for filling in this evening. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes for May 22nd, 2023, approval of the bills in the amount of $1,431,153.77, approval of a $400 payment for the June 22nd, 2023 concert in the park, which is a performance by Hung Up, and approval of the Michigan Township Association annual dues for July 1 of this year to June 30th of next year in the amount of $8,521. Discussion, or is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mrs. Rose to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, we do have two additions that we discussed for additions to the agenda. We proposed item E3 for some repairs to one of our fire apparatus that should be approved. And then item G5 would be the addition of a FOIA appeal. So unless there's any discussion or some other comment, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of these two items.
So moved.
All right, is there support? Support. All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Badkins. Discussion, board. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next is announcements. I do have a few brief announcements. The Detroit Institute of Arts has chosen Harrison Township to display 8 famous art replicas that are installed in accessible places throughout our community. The DIA developed this program to encourage everyone to view and explore and appreciate fine art, as well as to encourage people to go to the DIA and visit some of these pieces of art and many others. For a full list of the locations of these 8 pieces of art, you can see the township website. Our Harrison Township Public Library recently extended its hours. The new hours, which started April 3rd, are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The library is also hosting a free electronics recycling event this Saturday, June 17th, from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m., 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. See their website for a list of items that will or will not be accepted. For more information on these and other great community events, you can visit the library's website, htlibrary.org. Call them 586-329-1261 or email them at librarian@htlibrary.org. Our Parks and Rec Committee is hosting a free concert at Waterfront Park June 23rd from 6 to 8:30 p.m. as a part of their Concert in the Park series. Light snacks and refreshments will be available for purchase, and our first concert features Hung Up an alternative rock band. For more information on these, as well as all other township events, you can call the supervisor's office, 586-466-1445. Visit our website, harrisontownshipmi.gov, or follow us on Twitter or Facebook, Harrison TWP MI. I suspect there might be a report on the fishing derby.
There will be in a second. I think the wrong date was listed in there for the concert. The concert is Thursday night, June 22nd.
Okay,
So just.
22nd.
Make sure it's a Thursday night you're coming out, because we
Yep.
don't want you to miss it.
No, I'm sorry. You know what happened was I opened up a prior announcement and copied and pasted from last year, and I bet you I didn't change the
I've
date.
been
So that's,
guilty of that myself.
yeah, so that is Thursday. That would be, let's see, would that be a week from this
A
Thursday?
week and a half, yeah.
Yep, so a
And
week
that's
from this
6 p.m.?
Thursday. What's that? 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Yep, and the time changed too, so I caught
Yeah,
that. but-
Yeah, 6 to 8:30.
Yep, that's what it is, so, all right. So, Waterfront Park, a week from this Thursday, 6 p.m., June 22nd. And then is there a report on the fishing derby?
Did you want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it?
Go ahead.
All right, well, Mr. Batkins did one heck of a job on coordinating. He always does every year. That's why he doesn't want to talk about it.
Maybe I'll talk about it.
No, he really does pull together. We got a lot of donations from the community. Freedom Boat Club was there, measuring the fish. We had about 110 kids, and then you multiply that times a parent or two, we had about 300 people there. The park was very agreeable and brought, extra tables for us. Our maintenance department came and helped set up early. We had the library there donating their time. We had the beautification committee. We had former trustee Mr. Batanti there grilling up hot dogs, free food, free gifts. I mean, everybody was happy. Just a beautiful day. Really was great time. So I think the community really appreciates that.
How was the fishing?
Not so good this year, right?
Yeah, there was some decent sized bass caught, but other than that, it was a little slower than normal.
Yeah.
We don't know why, but
Well, the fish know it's free fishing weekend.
they were tripping on the fishing line, to be honest with you. So, no, it was a great, and
Yeah.
Miss Rose was there and, helped us set up, and the day just flowed really well, so.
Yeah, it was good.
18 down and a couple more to go, right?
Yeah.
You got it.
And I can report that at the same time, I was honored to represent the board at the Huron Point Yacht Club Blessing of the Fleet.
Good.
So I was there, and great local organization. And so it was a beautiful Saturday morning. Anything else to report by the board? We do have, we're fortunate to have our county commissioner, Mrs. Barbara Zinner, here, and I'd invite her up to give a few words or comments and update.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and everybody. Yes, that was a very busy Saturday. I would like to have gone to the Derby and to the Blessing of the Fleet, but I had a 3-year-old granddaughter that was in her first dance recital, so that's where everybody was. She was the littlest one, waving as she was the last one of the group to go out, so she took the show. It was really cute. I'm here to tell you about, and you all probably know about this, but I spoke to another group, and they were not aware. Quite a few people weren't aware, and they're highly intelligent people. Of course, we're all seeing, and it comes and goes, a lot of crime. We're seeing more crime now than we have seen, than I've ever seen since I've been in Harrison Township, which is over 40 years. And it seems to come in streaks, but generally there's more crime. And with that comes jail time and inmates going in and the whole scenario. I actually worked in the jail for about 6 months as a nurse a long time ago. So I went for a tour my first year on the board, and Sheriff Wickersham was taking me around, and I said, "Oh, I've worked here before." He said, "You did?" And I said, "Yes, I did." The hours didn't work with Steve coming home and me leaving at 7 o'clock at night. It just wasn't right. Well, you know Steve. He's always busy. So it just didn't work. But it was an interesting job, and I learned a lot in that 6 months. It's an interesting scenario. So anyway, now that I'm on the board and we're hearing a lot more about it, and coming back to that building, I just couldn't believe that it was the same building. It was built in the 50s. When they build jails now, they build them completely different because people are different now. We know a lot of our society is different. And they look for different things. They're watching out for different things. It's a whole genre of ways to do things. Just like computers. You're updating and you're changing things and watching things. So one of the things that they want to do is the city, the county voted down a new jail. That was before I got on. Now they're working to do what they can with the jail we have. And one of the things they want to do, we've been putting money into it because it's literally at some areas falling apart. But what they want to do is put on, and I have literally forgotten the word, and you may have to slip it to me.
Is it the intake? Is it intake?
Thank you, intake. I always lose that word when I go to talk. They want to build, and citizens watching this may not be aware of it, it's why I'm bringing it up, especially, thank you, an intake center. And the idea is to have 3 areas of experts, specialists, one for citizens that come in with high mental stress or mental situations, criminals, of course, and also people who are on a high drug situation. That's very bad. And there'll be people to assess what situation they're in, what can they do for them right now, and what is the ulterior expectation for them at that immediate time and longer, in a time for maybe 10 days, whatever the situation will require. And there could be a person with 2 situations happening at the same time, as we can all imagine. So that's what the plan is for the intake center, and then to have some, I say beds, but they're actually cells, single cells, for people who need to be monitored. So that's what we're working on now. It was presented to us a month ago. They're looking for more money because it's going to be $228 million, I think, plus. Now they're coming back tomorrow or this week to see how we are going to, what they want, what the deputy executives want to say to us, what they have come up with. Could they get another grant? What are they looking for? We have state grants, federal grants, all kinds of grants, state money, and so there is money coming in, but it's very costly. So that's what's happening. We will know more as this next meeting progresses. I absolutely don't expect there to be a millage. I don't see that happening at all. I don't know that, but I would be surprised if there was a millage. I don't expect that at all. That's what's happening for the situation. Also, I have a flyer that's just been put out in the area. This, you can't really see it, but I am the chairperson for the Older Adult Advisory Committee, and that is a committee comprised of highly intelligent older adults from different areas of our community. We meet once a month, and we have speakers, all kinds of speakers from different areas of society. We learn a lot, actually. And these older adults, I told Don when he wanted me to be a chair, I said, I don't want to go on that committee because I chaired it last year. And I said, they're all really, really smart. So they're much smarter than me. He said, no, Barb, I want you on that board. So anyway, it's a great group of people. We learn a lot with the speakers, and it's an hour long. It's just great. Sometimes the representatives from the communities have great ideas, and then they take the ideas back to the people in the communities. And there was a communication about traveling across the county for elderly people, and there was a kind of a mishap or misstep that they were able to solve just by communication, sometimes. And so that will be the 20th of June, a little over a week. It'll be in the Harrison Township Senior Center. So for anyone who would like to come, see how we do the meeting. It's a little different, of course. And Don said, "You're going on the road, Barb." I said, "Okay, let's see how that goes." So we'll be going to different communities in the county. I think it'll be fun. It'll be nice. So we'll just have fun. We have fun wherever we go. And the speakers, as I say, are very interesting. Also, I see that Mike Butts is here. I had been hearing about him and what he's explaining about the election situation. And I was able to meet him and hear him just last week. And what he has to say is extremely interesting. I think you'll find him to be a very interesting person to listen to. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I echo the commissioner's comments regarding the new planned intake center. I kind of tend to think, I remember as a boy, we went to Greenfield Village, and we had like a day where we went to the old school that's at, I want to say McGuckin or something like that. But either way, there's an old schoolhouse there at Greenfield Village, and you think back and you think, gosh, this was kind of primitive, right? I mean, everybody was in the same room, and we know today that there are a lot of different streams for students with various, maybe some students who might be more advanced, some students who might have various challenges, and just in our school district, just at the middle school level, this school specializes in this kind of student. If you've got this issue or concern, your student goes there. And I kind of see the same thing with the jail. There was a time when we said, hey, you've committed a crime, you go to jail. We recognize now a little bit better that maybe there's an underlying issue that might have led to this criminal activity. And if we can address that, maybe we have the potential for a better outcome. So I'm certainly supportive of the effort that the sheriff is making in trying to recognize that, that facility, worked at a time, but there are various reasons that people might be incarcerated. And if we can address the root cause, maybe they don't come back and get them back on track. So I support the work of the commission and the sheriff on that. Any other announcements? Hearing none, we'll move forward. We do have an appointment to the Beautification Commission. Let's see. So board members, Diane Marveso is a volunteer. She has applied to be a member of our Beautification Commission. Diane's active with the library, long-term resident. I know that she was a part of the school district. Many of us probably, our children had her in preschool, and a good member of our community. She's expressed an interest to be on the Beautification Commission, and so we have before us a recommendation to appoint Ms. Diane Marveso to the Beautification Commission for a 2-year term to expire June 13th, 2025. Any discussion, or is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Support.
Got a motion by Mrs. Rose, a support by Mr. Brado. Discussion. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next, we have a few items from our fire department, and we're fortunate to have Chief Bostater here. First one is regarding the hire of a firefighter paramedic. Chief?
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me come to you with these 3 agenda items. So the first one is for a firefighter paramedic looking to have a new hire. We currently are +1. We have a retirement on June 23rd, which will put us back to even. We had an excellent candidate apply. We put him through an oral board interview. He had a composite score of 90.3. He's fresh out of the academy, the fire academy in Macomb. He's also fresh out of paramedic school. He's pretty green, but he also did ride-alongs with us within the fire department, and he was really impressed by how we operate as a fire department. He wants to exclusively work within Harrison Township and for Harrison Township Fire Department after having done ride-alongs with other communities. So that's a real feather in the cap for all of our firefighters. We treat all of our students excellent. We give them the opportunity to learn while they're with us. We help them with their EMT classes, their paramedic classes, skills within the academy. And so Harrison Township Fire Department has always had an excellent reputation of treating our students excellent, which really helps us to recruit. And this is one of those incidents. So this is obviously in this really competitive market for hiring. We want to make sure that we get this guy under contract, and so I'm seeking approval to hire Colton. And I said, you know, you don't have a lot of work experience. He's a young guy, like 22 years old. I said, and what we ask from you is loyalty within the fire department as we welcome you into our family. And he, rest assured, said, I would be honored, and I don't want to work anyplace else.
So I think two things. One is it's important for the board to understand that we do have the potential, an estimate of potentially 4 retirements coming up. So while this approval would put us at +1 in the short term, first of all, we recognize that an actual retirement which has occurred puts us right back there, number one. Number two, this person really doesn't count for staffing until, what, about a 4-week period?
So we put them through pretty much like a, 2 40-hour weeks. We kind of call it our junior fire academy, and just teach them all things Harrison Township Fire Department before we put them on the road and count them as manpower. But as you stated before, we have 1 retirement plus 4 additional for this year.
Yep, so recruiting is important.
Yeah.
This is a 1-year probationary period, so, compared to some of our other bargaining units, this is a pretty lengthy probation. So while someone may do good on ride-alongs and they may do well on the oral boards, we do everything we can to select a good candidate, but we still got a year to kick the tires, right?
And this will have been my 10th hire since I've been here, since I was appointed November 4th of 2019, which means that in our fire suppression services, we've replaced 40% of our staffing with this hire, which is pretty significant. And, what that means is that it's not only are we a newer, fresher fire suppression, it also means that a lot of people put a lot of work and time and energy training these individuals and making sure that they're doing things the Harrison Township Fire Department way, and that we're operating at a very high level of service.
Yeah, and the last comment that I would have would be that, certainly it's the fact that this individual may have experienced multiple departments and chose to come here, and I appreciate the efforts of the chief, but it's also really a feather in the cap of IAFF 1737, because the culture that our firefighters have established is obviously one that's attractive to a young guy who right now is in high demand and can go a lot of different places. So I commend you and the folks in your department for making our fire department attractive to young guys that are in demand. Any discussion, questions, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize the offer of employment to 1 candidate for the position of probationary firefighter paramedic, subject to a 1-year probationary period.
And the minutes should reflect, I'm not going to try to pronounce the last one. I will try to pronounce it.
It's Osipka.
Osipka, okay.
Yeah. And then the other thing to add to is that it's contingent upon him passing a psychological evaluation and a background investigation and a physical.
Right, and those are, and a part of the reason why that kind of chicken egg here, all of those things cost money, right? So if the board isn't willing to hire this person, no sense in going through those evaluations. And we have had background investigations come back, which have led us not to hire someone, but that's the exception and not the rule. All right, is there support?
Support.
Okay, we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Thank you, board. Next, chief.
All right, so the next item is actually a memorandum of understanding that we have drafted with the help of our attorneys. And so what we're proposing is we're trying to create an incentive for individuals to come in and work overtime. So as you know, family dynamics have changed. It's, two people in a household working, young children, and there's a lot of things going on outside of just work. And so our workforce has changed a little bit. I think that some of the younger generations are maybe doing a better job of work-life balance. And however, how that impacts us is that when we have injuries, when we have retirements, and we're short individuals, it makes it more difficult for us to get people to come in and work overtime. Like we said previously, we have 4 looming retirements. We're going into the busiest season of our year, which in Harrison Township are the months of June, July, August, and into September, when we have a huge influx of additional people coming to use their boats. We have 500,000 people that are coming to use Metro Park every season, and so that means a greater workload, and we're trying to just make sure that we have our staffing adequate at both of our fire stations. So what I'm proposing is that, Ken may be able to explain this better than I. There's basically the way we do our wages. It's based on a high cycle. We work 24-hour shifts. We're 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 4 days off. And that cycle just rotates. So there's a high cycle. So if you worked overtime in that high cycle, you would get your overtime rate, which is 1.5% plus your incentives. So what I'm proposing is that we give that rate regardless of that high cycle to incentivize people to come in and work overtime. We don't have a ton of overtime. However, we do have 4 injuries right now with 4 looming retirements, and I'm trying to incentivize, trying to get people to come in if they are going to take time away from their families and their other hobbies, then trying to entice them with a little bit of an increase in monies.
So, and I appreciate the explanation. So, the Fair Labor Standards Act defines how overtime compensation is paid. So 95% of us recognize that you get overtime after 40 hours. That's how it's set up. Some of the different places I worked, sometimes they would pay you overtime after 8. That was a little bit of better shop to work at or a better employer, because you could say, I'm going to take Friday off, but I worked 4 10s and I got 8 hours of overtime and I took Friday off. Within the firefighting realm, or I should say within a few different ones, but primarily firefighting, when you're a 24-hour employee, that structure is a little bit different because clearly you're working 24 hours at a time. So the government requires that you pay overtime after, I believe it's 53 hours in a week.
56.
I thought it was 53 because I thought it was 212. I think it's 212 in a 28-day cycle.
So we are,
I think, I'm pretty sure it's, either way, the whole point is, but regardless of the number, the whole point is that overtime comes at 28 days at a time. So within a 28-day cycle, if for whatever reason, maybe we talked about dance recitals, maybe you take a day off because your daughter has a dance recital, well, now you work another 24-hour shift, you're not getting overtime for that time. So to simplify this is an incentive to encourage folks coming in on their days off because they recognize that during these critical staffing times, they will be paid at the time and a half rate. This is really slightly more than a 6-month trial period. I mean, we put this into action. We're already 2 weeks into the month of June, and as the chief said, July, August, part of September, those are the challenges. Sometimes, I think, hunting season sometimes is a little bit of a challenge, but that's kind of a little blip. But this has a sunset of December 31st. So this was something that the chief worked with IAFF 1737 to come up with something different. When the chief presented that to Larry and Adam and myself, we talked about it. We were supportive of it. I know the agreement was that at some point in the future, if we look at renewing this or including this in a future collective bargaining agreement, we would really want to see what the cost of this was. And I feel like that's a little slippery, but it's understood that we kind of want to try this out for the balance of the summer season obviously through the end of the year, but that's the big time. And then kind of take a look at it, see how it worked, and see if it's effective, or if it was just not realistic, either to the firefighters or from a budgetary standpoint.
And I wouldn't even be proposing this if we weren't doing well on our budget.
Correct. So this is kind of a, hey, let's give it a stab. It's got a sunset at the end of the year. If it works, we might talk about including it in the bargaining agreement, because that is up at the end of this year. And if not, maybe we learn from it and come up with a even better way to address this, to make it economically feasible and incentivizing overtime. Discussion, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding addressing minimum staffing, holdover, and callback overtime.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Tominello. And again, as I say, this is really, we'll take a stab at it, try it out. This is, it's a collaborative effort with the union and the leadership to see if we can come up with something that works. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. We'll execute that, and next on our agenda is an additional item, item E3 regarding repairs. So it's item E3 for item E2, right?
Correct. E3 is E2.
Right.
So engine 2 is typically would be our reserve engine. We've had some warranty repair work done on engine 1. That has been completed. They're doing warranty repair work on ladder 1. It will be out of service for an additional 2.5 months. The company that we bought our 2 new fire apparatus from are covering the cost of our rental fire engine, which is a 2005. Our engine 2 is a 2006 Pierce Aero XT, and we just put money into the transmission. We had it running great, and we went to start it, and the whole right side of it on Thursday dropped down about 4 inches. And what happened was the torsion arm control on the right side had a break in it, and it made the whole right side of the engine drop. So it's not operable. It's a proprietary part by Pierce Manufacturing. They had 1 in stock. We had them put it on hold immediately, and it's our primary facility that we use for all of our repairs is R&R out of Northville, and they were able to secure that. I'm seeking approval to get the repair work completed on it. We're gonna have to have it towed down there. I think the cost is a little over $6,000 is what we have on the invoice. Yeah, specifically $6,068.32. That includes the parts and labor. And they do a good job with R&R. As you all know, as we've discussed previously, is Michigan Fire Apparatus used to do primarily all of our repair work. They went out of business. And so we had already had R&R as a safety net in place, and so they've really stepped in. And they're also the dealership for Ferrera. There wasn't a dealership originally. We asked them to become a dealership, so we have a really good working relationship with them, and they're trustworthy.
So this is really our backup fire apparatus,
This is correct.
but it is, I mean, there's no intent, at this point, it's not scheduled to be replaced. It needs to be functioning, and right now, it's missing a right front spring, basically. The torsion bar is a part of the suspension.
We're trying to put 5 years in between our newest fire apparatus and our next one. So this is 17 years old, and it's got some Harrison Township Road miles on it, and which are kind of tough on our apparatus, that's for sure, along with just Michigan and salt. And so we do our best to keep them clean on the underbody, but we had it running really good, and so we were disappointed to have to take it out of service again. But this is primarily, we had been using that as our front line, and then the loaner fire apparatus that we had we were using that as our reserve. So if we were on a fire, we would do callback, we would staff with that reserve rig to make sure that we still had coverage within Harrison Township. and for all the residents. So,
And the shipping is not the towing. So
correct. I took the towing out of it.
Right.
They had a towing price of $750, but we have a great working relationship with Nick's Towing. Nick's Towing said that they would do it for $620, so we took that off. This is the shipping of the actual
The actual
portion.
part, yeah, 'cause that's a pretty big part, I'm sure.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Right, so
Runs-
really, we're looking at a total price, slightly under 7,000, right? With the shipping and the 6,068, right?
I
So
think
about
it was,
60.
that was included in it, so we're 1,060.
No, I'm sorry, the towing.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so there is
Yeah,
a
with
cost
the-
for towing.
Yeah, with the towing, it would
Yeah,
be.
so a proposed motion might be to authorize R&R, the towing of E2 and the repair of E2 at R&R at a cost, not to exceed $7,000,
Okay.
So moved.
right?
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Brado with support by Mrs. Rose. And we had some discussion questions. Any other questions or discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board, and thank you, chief, for all that
you.
information.
Appreciate it.
Next on our agenda is item F1 from the treasurer's office. Mr. Tominelli.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Kent County Communications, or KCI, is the exclusive vendor the treasurer office uses for print and mail tax bills and associated newsletters. KCI has the ability to utilize township postal permits, if applicable, bulk mail discounts, and fulfill USPS requirements to reduce the overall cost of postage when available. The treasurer's office would like approval to continue to utilize KCI for tax billing and associated newsletters throughout 2023.
All right, and so the estimated cost is not to exceed 21,000.
That's correct, and that's for both postage, envelopes, paper, fulfillment.
And could you speak to, is it an existing relationship?
Yes, it is. We've been, actually, ever since I took over office, we moved to KCI. A lot of municipalities use them. They're out of Grand Rapids, but their costs are very reasonable, and their service is exceptional. So, if you've seen any of the quality of the stuff that's been mailed through taxes, and actually even the water department uses them as well, so we want to continue our relationship.
Yeah, and it's an existing relationship that's went well, and it was bid out in the past, you looked at the cost. And so
Yes.
this is kind of just a renewal of an existing relationship.
Yep, just want to make sure everything's transparent.
All right, any discussion, questions, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve up to 21,000 to be used for 2023 print and fulfillment services with Kent Communications Incorporated.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Mr. Badkins? Yeah. You guys, you're doing your David Brado imitation there. Got a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Badkins. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next, item G1. Board members, currently, the supervisor's office oversees and manages the township website. Our website is hosted through a company called Revise. Through updates and maintenance of the website, it has been discovered that several facets of the website are no longer in service or are not functioning properly. There's some, I guess we'll call broken links or features that aren't in action. So through a training session with our current web host, it was discovered that the website has not had a refresh since 2017. Several items are outdated and not functioning. I think originally we signed the agreement with Revise back in 2012. We did a refresh of the website back in 2017. The annual fee for the hosting, maintenance, so forth is $1,500. That's been constant since then. Ultimately, what we're looking at is we would look at a refresh of our website, some improvements, maybe repairing some of those links, things like that. And moving forward with that hosting and all of the support, their annual fee would be increased to $2,000. So really, the agreement here is to extend our maintenance agreement, which dates back to 2012, which has been $1,500 as a level cost during that time. So in increasing the annual fee to $2,000 for the next 5 years, which is in the agreement, and included in that is a refreshment of the website. And I believe the deputy supervisor's been working with building department, with water and sewer, trying to improve what online services are available. And I know some of the things that we wanted to do will be incorporated in this refresh. So this is ultimately going to lead to some enhanced services. You probably understand it better than me.
Well, so one of the big things that we're trying to do here is, because we're limited with the current version that we're using, if you want somebody to fill out a form, right now, what you have to do is you have to go out to the website, print the form, and then either scan it and email it in, or print it and bring it in. So one of the new features of this software is actually to fill the form online. It'll be submitted online, so there's no interruption. So that's one of the big things that I know for my department, for water and sewer, and even for many of our departments have those type of forms. So this will make it easier for the residents, and it'll be seamless. We don't have to sort of work in the dark ages when it comes to forms.
Yeah, there are contractors that might have to travel here to do this, and by streamlining online forms and some of the online payment options that you have, some of these more, certainly some permits can be a little bit more complicated, but for contractors that, say it's a hot water tank replacement, pretty routine stuff, this makes that process, this will help to make that process easier for homeowners and contractors to do the work. So any discussion, questions, or is there a motion?
Well, in that first paragraph, when it says, it was discovered that several facets are no longer in service or are not functioning properly. And so we're using the same company, like,
So
were they
yeah.
proactive? Because are they supposed to be maintaining it?
No, so what's happened was the originally this refresh, 2012 dates back to when Mr. Witt was the deputy supervisor, but I don't believe, I wish he were here because he could tell me, but I believe that when we did that refresh, 2012 was when he was first elected to clerk, and during that time, Mr. Dimchik was the deputy supervisor. He went through that initial redesign. 2017, he went through the refresh. Not much after that, he was lucky enough to get a position. Mr. Aragona came on board, so there was a handoff from Andrew to Joe to Stephanie. And at this point, Stephanie, Andrew probably knew the most about this. Joe introduced him to it. Joe worked with it a while. Now Stephanie is here. And as she was looking into it, asking questions like, how do I do this? How do I do that? The folks through Revise basically said, hey, that thing doesn't, somebody, whether it was Andrew, Joe, or Stephanie, you changed something on the website, but now that function no longer works. So this isn't necessarily a thing where Revise didn't give us support as much as we've had a change in the people who manage the software in the supervisor's office. And at this point, there's some things that don't function. Not saying that you can't click on something and get to something, but there are functions that are built into that software, but because maybe we modified certain web pages, somebody calls up and says, hey, can you add this to the water and sewer web page? Maybe we added it incorrectly. And so as a result, it doesn't give us the same service.
Yeah, I think the other thing to note is, what I found was that the basic package that was purchased in 2012 was just that, it was a basic package. So what happens when we were trying to do more advanced functions within, especially, and I lived through this with Point and Pay, and we still do today, we have to pay for those upgrades. So if I need to have something seamless where it works with Point and Pay, we can't do it. We have to get Revised and pay them. So this will allow us, through this version, that'll be part of the upgrade. So we'll be able to look at those things where we had basic coverage. That'll give us some more in-depth coverage.
Sometimes when you add more benefits to a website, there's modules that get plugged in, and there's extra coding that needs to.
Exactly,
to
and
happen.
that's where we have
I think
that
that's where
basic
we're at.
package, and
Yep.
we need to get to that next level.
Yeah.
It's not a complete redesign, it will look different, but with the look and feel and the integration will be a lot more seamless.
Yeah, and I think what drove this in some cases was the desire to do some of these fillable forms. And they said, oh, well, you've got to fix this, or you've got to go back if you want to do that. And not something that we've done in the past. So, any other discussion? Is there-
The price seems to be reasonable to me.
Yeah, and we've dealt with them for over 10 years. It's been pretty smooth when we call. We get, sometimes we sit here saying we're so frustrated with a supplier because we're getting poor service. That hasn't been our experience with this service provider.
And you're right, Mr. McCaskill, I mean, when we call, when we're struggling with something, we call them and they help us with it. They will help us and walk us through it. But then there's certain things we get to and we say, well, can we do this? And we say, well, no, you got the basic package, again, going back to that basic. If you want to do it, we can do it, but it's going to cost you money. So I think this is a good compromise. I mean.
And
if we
the
could
actual
redo the whole
upfresh-
thing, it'd be a lot more expensive.
Right, the refresh of the website technically is buried in that annual fee.
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
Yep, so, any other discussion, or is there a motion?
I'll make
The motion is to approve the revised annual fee of $2,000 for 5 years, as well as the refresh of the website.
I will make that motion.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, with support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members.
Just, I guess, one point for our attorney, under the terms, number 4, this agreement is the only legal document governing this sale and is subject to the laws of the state of Michigan. I guess I'm hung up on the only legal document governing the sale. And subject to the laws, I would like for it to read, this agreement is subject to the laws of the state of Michigan.
Well, I read it as it governed as the sale, and it is subject to the laws. Maybe it's just semantics. I'm reading it, this is the only legal document governing the sale, and I guess it should say, and the agreement is subject to the laws of the state of Michigan.
Yeah,
But that's how I read it.
Yeah, I read it like that once, and I read it once, so I just get into,
What else could subject to the laws of the state of Michigan mean, though, right?
yeah, I mean, it's a pretty plain, and there's not 45 pages of Ts and Cs.
Yeah, it's nice, yeah.
So it doesn't, this one is a little bit different, but it goes back to when our vendors are telling us how it's gonna be in it, and I still struggle with that, so. So anyways, I just wanted you to take note of that, Mr. Huth, and on other ones where there are a lot of terms and conditions and things that I think we should really start looking at those a little bit more, so.
Okay, you got it. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Brado. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda, item G2. The supervisor's office recently reviewed the pay for part-time employees in neighboring communities. We found that the current pay for our part-time employees was comparable but below some of our peer communities. In order to remain competitive as well as to retain current employees, I am requesting that the Board of Trustees authorize a one-time 50-cent per hour raise to the following part-time employees: our smart bus drivers, our parks and ground maintenance worker, our parks and grounds maintenance supervisor, and cable operators. Total cost of this would be approximately $4,000 annually. And this is a one-time request.
4,000 among all the workers.
Correct, total. Yep, yeah, not per employee. That's right.
I'll
That's
make
the
a
total
motion
cost.
to authorize the pay raise for those that you just mentioned.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Badkins. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda, item G3 regarding our county drains. Since Candace Miller was elected to the Macomb County Public Works Commissioner position, That was back in 2016. We have seen a massive improvement in how our drains are managed. It's an understatement. We have partnered with Public Works Office in previous years to clean out multiple drains. The projects have made a substantial difference in how the drains flow and ultimately how hundreds of acres in the center of the township drain. I was recently contacted by the Deputy Public Works Commissioner, Dan Acchiavetti, about some drain cleanouts in Harrison Township for 2023. We discussed multiple locations. He estimated a total of $10,000 to $15,000 worth of work. Public Works Office shares the cost of the work, so it's a 50-50 split. I'm requesting that the Board of Trustees approves up to $10,000 worth of matching funds for the cleanout of multiple drains in Harrison Township for 2023. This is kind of one of those things where as they get into the project, some of those things are, pretty obvious, pretty basic. Sometimes there's some unknowns. So this gives us a little bit of a cushion, but, based on our experience, I'm certainly comfortable in asking for a little extra in case we encounter something through the process. We've been doing this really since 2017, and it's gone smooth and beyond what we experienced prior to that. So this is an easy request for me to make, that's for sure.
Is this an annual charge, or do you?
Just one time. Yep,
So,
so,
I mean, one time, so like every 3 years, every 5 years?
No,
What do you foresee, do you know?
yeah, so good, that's a good question. So, there is some drain work where they came to us and said, here's specifically what we think, and here's what we're targeting, and we're going from here to there, and this is what we're asking for. Mr. Acchiavetti reached out to me and he said, I can type up a letter and I can say, well, we're probably gonna touch this drain and that, and I can try to do it. And I said, I was comfortable in bringing this to the board. This is a one-time issue, but I think it would be fair to say it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility to think that we might make this same request next year. We've made this request in past years for more than 10, for less than 10, going back, again, as I say, probably to 2017. We did sections of the Vanter de Buff and the Savan Drain, Murdoch Ballard in prior years. And so there's just areas where they get complaints, where there's choke points, and this is, probably touching a few different drains. This isn't any one particular drain from point A to point B. Just one example, I think it's the Savan that crosses Ashland near Lance Cruz, and that clean out of that drain adjacent to a parcel that we actually acquired through tax foreclosure allowed us to turn around and sell a parcel that had been really unsellable for a long time. So, I mean, just the work that Public Works did in cleaning up that drain generated, we probably bought that parcel for a few $1,000s of back taxes. Probably turned around and sold it for 20 grand, something like that. I could look it up, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's been a fruitful and productive relationship. And I know in conversations with my peers in other townships, they're all doing the same thing. So, any discussion, questions, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to partner with Macomb County Public Works Office to clean out various county drains in Harrison Township at a cost not to exceed $10,000.
Is there support?
Support.
And again, this is, once we know that we have a budget and I've got board approval, I work with Public Works Office, they invoice as the work goes on. Frankly, wouldn't surprise me if we don't spend half of that. But, recognizing that if we're in the process and we're working and they say, well, we really could go to here, I'd rather finish that work and do what makes sense in the field, instead of coming back to the board for a few $1,000s.
We're talking about water. We were out the beach during Memorial Day weekend, and people were actually swimming at the beach.
Yeah.
It was busy, and they were swimming.
Yep.
I think it might be because we have less precipitation this year, but
Well, there's a lot of factors, but for sure, the work that's being done, independent of this, Public Works Office has undertaken projects to line our sanitary interceptors, to improve combined sewer systems south of us. There's a lot going on, for sure.
there's a lot of positive
And,
things happening.
Yeah, Ms. Miller's doing a great job.
When you see the list, is that something you can publish once it's been confirmed, even if it's at the end of the year, so we know?
Well,
where we're at?
so for sure, any work that's done under this is gonna be invoiced. So what I can say for sure is I'll do my best to try to remember, like, okay, when I got an invoice and it says, well, we cleaned from here to there and this is the work. Of course, it'll be in the board packet because in order for us to pay it. But for sure, this is just one of those things like you get it, so if I can remember, right? You know, sometimes you just like, pay the bill. For sure it'll be in any future board packet, but I'll absolutely do my best to keep everybody updated on what we do. Sometimes you get a chance, you know, come out there, you take some pictures and you know, email it to everybody if I'm paying attention, I guess. So, all right, any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next, G4. At our last regular board meeting, we approved the application for a Defense Community Infrastructure Program Grant, or DCIP is the acronym, grant, to help fund the cost to rehabilitate the Prentice Sanitary Sewer Pump Station. We're working with Wade Trim on this. Ultimately, the application for the grant, we approved some funds to have Wade Trim work on this. We're also working with Selfridge, no small part of that. I mean, they're generating documentation, helping us, guide us through the federal process. One of the things that was brought forward is that we would adopt a resolution of support for this grant. So last meeting, we passed something, the minutes say, yeah, we support it, but it is typical for this kind of a grant application that we adopt a resolution. I recommend the adoption of the resolution of support for the DCIP grant application for the Prentice Sanitary Sewer Pump Station Rehabilitation. I do want to point out that in review of the grant and the language, because this is a federal grant, it's Department of Defense, it actually goes through the Secretary of Defense. They have I guess I'd say pretty rigid rules and structures when you deal with the federal government. And the grant, the website dedicated to this grant indicates that matching funds of 30% are required. The federal government's definition of us as a municipality, in which they set certain parameters, we meet the definition of a rural community, basically based on our size. And for rural communities, there isn't a match required. So when I drafted this, I put in 30% because that's what the parameter was for the grant. In conversation with the grant writer from Wade Trim, we understood that, okay, well, that number could be zero, could be greater than 30%. But obviously, the more that we put in the form of matching funds toward the project, the greater the likelihood that we may get the grant. So while this resolution reads 30%, it's important for this board to understand that since I drafted the resolution, we've come to realize that that matching funds can be any quantity. Let's see. The grant writer gave us a guideline. He indicated he would recommend a 15 to 20% contribution, although the absence of a local cost share does not negatively impact the competitiveness of the proposal, providing that matching commitment helps the scoring. In other words, it isn't as if you have to have that, but the more funds that you put toward it, the greater the likelihood. So at this point, the recommendation from the grant writer is a 15 to 20% contribution. It's open for discussion. I'm comfortable in recommending 20%. I still think getting, 4/5 of the cost of rebuilding a sanitary sewer pump station is a good deal on my part. So I don't know if there's any thoughts the board has, or questions, or a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution to support the DCIP grant application for the Prentice Sanitary Sewer Pump Station Rehabilitation with a 20% match.
Okay. I agree with that. So we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins. Is there support?
Support.
All right. And again, we talked about this 3 weeks ago, so really nothing's changed here. We're, working on this. This was just something, we're lining up letters of support. We'll take our best shot to see if we can get some federal funds back in Harrison Township. Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Ms. Selgott, this will require a roll call vote. So the motion was by Mr. Badkins, was supported by Mrs. Rose.
Okay, Mr. Badkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati's excused. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Witt's excused. Mr. Verkest?
Yes, thank you. All right, next on our agenda is item G5, and it was a FOIA appeal. Mr. Huth, I'm going to kind of well, I don't know if I say relinquish, but you understand this process a little bit better. I know that our clerk, as the president of the Michigan Clerks Association, does, but he's at their annual conference, and I think finishing up his one-year term on Thursday.
I like relinquish. We can go with that. Yes, thank you, board members. In the audience tonight is Mr. Michael Butts. He has brought to you tonight an appeal of at least a partial denial of a FOIA request that he sent dated May 2nd. In that FOIA request of the township, Mr. Butts is sought a copy of the extract files of electronic poll books from the November 8th, 2022 election and the May 2nd, 2023 election. Mr. Witt's response to that was twofold. One, nothing available from the May election, as Harrison was one of the communities that did not have an election in May. And with respect to the November election, it was a denial, and then later a statement that some may be produced. But nonetheless, there's been a denial of some portion of this request. So pursuant to his ability and his right, Mr. Butts would like to address the board tonight to make his case as to what should be produced. And this might be a good opportunity to let him speak. Most of the time, those appeal hearings are not subject to a 3-minute clock as such.
Sure.
So just.
So this is a right granted to any FOIA applicant per those rules which define FOIA.
That's correct. It's, there's a couple different options that the applicant can take, but this is one that he has chosen and one he's permitted to use.
Okay. And I'll just say, this isn't typically similar to public comment, this isn't a back and forth conversation. We as a board basically listen to that appeal.
If you would, and then I would answer questions afterwards and maybe give you a couple recommendations for you to consider.
Gotcha, thank you.
Good evening, Michael Butts. I'm a current resident of Bruce Township as of December. I would like to share, this has been a very interesting journey for me the last 6-8 weeks. Some communities do. We had very, very interactive conversations. My FOIA appeal in Bruce Township went pretty long, and actually thought my appeal was going to be granted, but at the very last minute, they did get enough votes to uphold the appeal, or I'm sorry, the denial. But I mean, I'll just share that. I think this is for everyone's benefit. We're kind of charting new waters here. I've had conversations with the sheriff's department, various police departments. I filed criminal complaints against some clerks and deputy clerks for their actions. And no one knows really with absolute certainty the right path. But the one thing everyone that's met me understand that I won't go away. So I want to get this resolved. And this will get resolved one of two ways. One, I'm able to conclude my audit of the poll books in Macomb County. I decided I have 4 grandchildren with one more on the way in September and probably 1 or 2 more after that. And I have to leave this country in at least the same shape my World War II veteran father did, who fought in the Battle of the Bulge at 19. And right now, I'm ashamed to admit that my generation, the baby boomers, we haven't done our job. And so I'm here for the remainder of my time on this earth. I'm here to try to make amends for my lack of commitment to, making sure that our country didn't go off the rails, which I've concluded it has. So I'm here as much for your benefit as mine. I wanted to start off because I wasn't sure. Mr. Witt was gracious enough, he put me on the agenda, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to address you before you made your decision. So I will share in the city of Warren. I got up at 5 in the morning and I put together exhibits and laws, and I walked into the room and I went to give them the information. Says, nope, we're making our decision based on what you already sent us. I'm like, well, I thought maybe you might want to learn from, there's some stuff that happened like yesterday with Michael Grix at the county. You might want to be aware of that, and a FOIA there. Nope. And so they took the very first agenda item and they voted on my FOIA appeal before I was even able to address them. But I will give a lot of credit to one of the council members. I think it's really worth mentioning here. Gary Watts, who's the council vice president, after he did read the information I sent ahead of time, and he said, I'm reading this, and these laws support this man's claim that he's entitled to this, so I am not comfortable. I will not make a motion nor support a motion to deny his FOIA appeal. The attorney made a whole lot of misstatements at that time, misrepresented a lot of facts, and the remaining members decided to deny my appeal. But I want to commend Gary Watts. And the same holds true with Bruce Township. The supervisor, I want to make sure I get his name right, because, he's my new supervisor, and what a way to meet your new supervisor in appeal. So Mike Philbrook, same thing. Supervisor Philbrook, and I'm not the same thing. I was able to actually do what you've afforded me the opportunity to do, come here and address you. And by the time I was done with my presentation, no one would make a motion to deny my appeal. And the attorney really pressed, that, hey, this is the deadline. And I said to the attorney and the whole board, I said, I will gladly, give you more time. You don't have to decide by the 10th day. Because unless you're not aware, or you may not be aware, but a FOIA, you have to give a response within 10 days after the appeal, unless there's extenuating circumstances. And my point to the board was that the fact that you could be breaking the law by denying my appeal, I think is extenuating enough that I'm happy to give you an extension. And I extend the same grace to all of you. If after you've reviewed everything, you determine that maybe I'm right, maybe you're in jeopardy by denying my FOIA claim illegally, my FOIA appeal, I extend the same grace. If you need additional time, take it. You have my acceptance of that. So I just wanted to give that background because this is like the 5th or 6th one of these I've done. I got like 18, 19 probably to go, every jurisdiction. But again, I can't say enough about Supervisor Mike Philbrook and Warren Councilman Gary Watts. So when I wasn't sure I was going to be able to address you before your vote, I got a little concerned. So I was up till 1:30 this morning preparing an email to send all of you. Now, I'm not offended if, an email coming in the wee hours of the morning, you had busy days. If you didn't get a chance to read it, I would not be offended at all. But since I am here and I am able to address you, if you're okay with responding to me, did anyone get the chance to read that email that I sent?
I'm just going to let you know that this is, and that we're going to listen to your appeal. It's not a back and forth with the board. I will.
Oh, I mean, they can decide that, not you. You're not the keeper of
They
their
asked
time.
me to advise them what the
Okay.
rules we're going to follow here.
So this is what he did at Shelby Township, I'll let you know. He tried to coerce the board to just get in line. So I'm telling you, you should listen, you should ask questions. You're going to want to do that. All right? So, all right, well then I'll read it. Since Geppetto over here doesn't want to allow you to speak, I'll read the letter. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this email finds you well. I thought it may be helpful to provide you the following information for review in preparation for the FOIA 2023-42 denial appeal meeting later this evening, right now. When the state of Michigan replaced paper poll books with the electronic poll book computers, the electronic poll book history files, also known as EPB_history.csv files, became the originating public records for our elections, and as such, must be retained at the township or city's clerk office for the 24-month record retention period mandated by MCL 168.810 and 168.811, as well as the 22-month record retention period for elections with federal candidates on the ballot, which November 2022 had federal candidates, under 52 U.S. Code 207-701 and 207-702, you must retain them for 22 months. The reason the poll book computers themselves cannot serve as a historical record is that they are dynamic in nature and constantly changing over time. One thing you also need to know is I was an IT professional for 30 years. I created software and designed databases for General Motors, Kmart corporations. I have extensive experience in this field, okay? And in 2015, I founded a cloud computing company that specialized in two primary industries, healthcare and banking and finance. And I think you all agree that those are two highly regulated industries. And our small company, maintained the data for those companies because of our expertise and our ability to secure that information. So I have a little bit of knowledge about all this. So if you think about it, definitely Mr. Tominello, who's the treasurer, he understands audits. And when you audit, you want to make sure you have a full trail. You need to do checks and balances. And, most organizations don't have the same person do accounts payables, accounts receivables, all the functions. Why? Because you need separation to prevent fraud, to prevent malfeasance. And so this is no different with our elections, other than I will argue maintaining those poll lists and the qualified voter files are more important than financial records because it's our freedom, right? It's our one person, one vote we're all entitled to. So we need to make sure that people that are voting or that votes that are counted are actually people that, have the right to vote. So, so they came up with all these codes and laws that are supposed to be supportive of the Constitution. And one, I thought, this is pretty good. We have 810. You have to keep accounting at the clerk, right? Because in our system of checks and balances, in our Republican form of government, it's designed to make it very difficult for tyranny to creep in. Now, they've done a good job of it, but it's more difficult. And one reason it's more difficult is you spread it out. So all the local clerks are the election officials. They're supposed to keep records of all this stuff so that if anything's called into question, you can call into examination what the state says in their centralized system that's controlled by a few people with very, very strange controls, meaning very few controls. You can compare it to what the local clerks have on record. And you can see, is this accurate? Okay? So what I figured was, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my own poll book for Macomb County by FOIAing all the poll books from all the municipalities. Then I'm going to FOIA a poll book from Macomb County clerk, and then I'm going to FOIA a poll book, the same records from the state Bureau of Elections. So I start writing these FOIA requests, and they start going out in late April. Sent one to you folks and a few others, including City of Memphis on May 2nd. So May 2nd, I get an email back right away from City of Memphis clerk. She had reviewed everything I provided. I wanted to make sure she knew under MCL 168.509GG, there was certain data that she needed to redact because I didn't want her to break the law. The last thing I wanted to do is stumble, cause someone to stumble to violate the law. So she said, yes, I saw that. And she said, it's going to take me some time to redact the birth year. She says, if you're okay with me taking out the whole birth date, including the year, I can give the file to you right now. I said, you know what, that's fine. I really don't care about the year right now. And so the cost was, I think, $19. I drove to Memphis on the 3rd the next morning. I brought a USB thumb drive. She gave me a copy of the file from November. And I said, well, this isn't too bad. Maybe 2-3 weeks, I'll have them all. Then I can build this master list. And well, what happened was I start getting denials. And pretty much everyone else in Macomb County denied my request. And they started to kind of reference certain reasons, but then they all settled in on what the Bureau of Elections, the director, Lori Bourbonnais, instructed all the clerks to not release the information to me under the grounds of MCL 15.243, sections 1Y and 1Z. In that the information the file will contain intellectual property, programming, cybersecurity plans, all these things, right? And here I am, a 30-year IT professional, thinking to myself, what in the world would all that stuff be in a log file? Okay, the log files, you know what's in there? Voter name, their ballot number, their voter number, this kind of stuff. I'm like, how is this a cybersecurity threat? So that's where, okay, there's something really interesting here. Somebody doesn't want me to do my audit. It was very clear to me. Well, here's something I will share with you. I've asked all the clerks in writing, have you looked at MCL 15.244? 244 is right after 243. So 243 is section 13 of the law, which you can say certain information is exempt according to all these categories. And the two that they mention, 1Y and 1Z, are valid categories. But it's not because I said so. It's 244 says you must separate the non-exempt information from the exempt information, and then you must disclose the non-exempt information and provide an explanation as to why you exempted the other information. So I'm looking at this lawfully obtained file that I got from City of Memphis. There's voter information. And I'm thinking the only threat this is to somebody that's doing something they shouldn't be doing. Somebody wants to suppress this. So I became more and more focused on it. And by the way, one thing I didn't share yet that's very important for you to understand the veracity of all this is that I went and I pulled my voting record and my change history report from my new home clerk, which is Bruce. And then there's a 501c3 called Election Integrity Force that's been FOIAing the Bureau of Elections information, the qualified voter file, for the last 18 months. So their lead investigator took my name, produced a report out of the FOIA data, the millions of records that they get every month from the state. And lo and behold, nothing matched. Not only didn't it match, I voted in St. Clair Shores most of my adult life. 2011, my wife and I moved to Clinton Township. I voted in Clinton Township from 2011 all the way through 2022. Then in December of 22, I moved, and where did I move? Bruce Township. So when they pulled my record and sent me the report, I said, this has to be a mistake. According to the state of Michigan, I voted in Bruce Township every election I've ever voted in. I've never voted in Bruce Township. Okay? What that's called, ladies and gentlemen, is altering public records. the state of Michigan, or the Secretary of State Bureau of Election holds themselves out as a keeper of the public records. They get on TV and say these are the safest elections we've ever had in this country. More secure than any time, anywhere. Even going back to the feathered pen days, we're way more secure than that. But yet their data is altered. And by taking that poll book and finding a woman that lives there, who I had met through a church function, she went and requested her information. Same thing, we pulled the BOE report, but in the case of Memphis, we had the poll book file because they gave it to us. So that was the originating record of the election, right? That's what time she signed in and all that. Well, lo and behold, some of the records show she voted absentee. The poll book shows she voted in person. The poll book showed that she voted at 14:04, which is 2:04 p.m., and she voted in person. The Bureau of Elections data, for her reports, mine, the hundreds of voters that have pulled their records, the Bureau of Reports data shows that they voted at 0 hour. And for anyone that's not in the military, that's 00:00:00. That's midnight. So every election, the records show everybody voted at midnight, the state records. So altering public records is a felony with up to a 14-year prison term, okay? And altering includes deleting and destroying, obviously, right? Because if you delete something, you've altered it. It's MCL 750.248. So here I am, really worried about the clerks. So I started from my home in Bruce and started fanning out to different clerks. And I went back to Clinton Township, where I did vote in 2022, and I spoke with Kim Meltzer, and I said, Ms. Meltzer, there's something horribly wrong going on. And so I told her, I'm going to record our conversation because I'm going to share a lot of information, and this is important. We got to get attention to this. So I recorded, and and she said, you know what, I'm going to bring in our lawyer. So she conferenced in Jack Dolan. I forget the law firm. His reaction, and I have it on a recording. He said, Kim, you better call your IT person and get them back in here before the poll books get updated for the May 2nd election. You need to preserve these files. That was his words, almost verbatim. So I'm feeling good. I'm like, okay, she's going to get all the files, make sure she gets the November file, make sure she doesn't destroy anything, unwittingly destroy anything. Because what you might not know is the Bureau of Elections Procedures and Manual says you must delete the poll book files within 7 days after the final canvass and the certification. Now, mind you, I just read you state law and federal law that says you need to retain the poll list at the local clerk's office, either 24 or 22 months, depending on state or federal, so state has a longer time. So how can the procedure say 7 days, delete it? Okay, so I dug more and more into it. Then I found the emails. I FOIA'd emails where they're threatening clerks that if you disclose that file, you'll have to buy new computers, which is complete fantasy that a log file that has the voter information could cause a breach of security on the computers. I mean, I can't even believe they use the excuse, okay? So the more this went, it kind of reminded me of most people are too young to know, but they had to have heard on TV, Watergate. Richard Milhouse Nixon, what do you say? I'm not a crook. He made, well, if Nixon would have just fessed up that either he was dumb and didn't know what he was doing when he told them what to do, break into that Democratic office, or if he would have just taken his licks, say, I was wrong, I shouldn't have done it, he would have probably been president for another term. So I don't know, and nor is it important to me that if the Secretary of State and her directors, if this is like purposeful malfeasance in office or just embarrassment from being so incompetent that they don't want anyone to know, either one is unacceptable, okay? I'm a born-again Christian. I don't want anybody going to jail. I really don't. But what I do expect is that they confess, all right, and they step down. Because when you sign an oath of office, you swear to uphold the Constitution and the laws. And if you break the law, it's like an automatic vacancy. Even though you might still sit in the chair and have the mic, according to the Constitution, according to the law, you're now a belligerent in that seat, and you must vacate. Okay? And so I don't want that to happen to people that reflect on what I share with them and say, you know what, we have to do the right thing here. We have to follow the law. Because if we don't follow the law, we shouldn't be sitting in these chairs. We shouldn't be representing the people. Okay? And so I will say, you know, there's a few other things. And one is section or MCL 750.478A. And I'm going to read this to you. A person shall not attempt to intimidate, hinder, or obstruct a public officer or public employee or a peace officer in the discharge of his or her official duties by a use of an unauthorized process. So we have the Secretary of State in Michigan and her directors mandating a directive dictating that people purge files that their duty, sworn duty, is to preserve at their office here in Harrison Township or down the road in Clinton Township for 24 months. So they violated the law, and they've got a lot of counts of violating that law. You know, it's into the thousands. And so I say to you, we've all really failed. I already admitted I failed. I'm trying to make amends to that for my grandchildren before I die. But you know what I did? I stopped watching TV. I stopped watching the news. I stopped watching, movies. And I started educating myself as an American. I started learning, understanding the founding documents, and started reading law. And guess what? We're programmed from when we're children. Oh, you need a lawyer for that. No, you don't. You need brain matter. We, the people, vote you all in, to represent us. We expect you to have your own discernment. We don't expect all your eyes to go to the lawyer. What do? That's not how it works. So if if we're not competent adults, then we shouldn't be serving the public in that capacity. So I have some questions that if I were you, since I can't ask the questions, I challenge you to ask your attorney. What is your justification reason why each of the data elements contained in the attached EPB history file that you all have in your inbox? You have a file. You have a sample from Memphis that's properly redacted according to law, and the clerk that provided it to me has had zero sanction by the Secretary of State. You know why I think that is? A little secret. I think it's because the state can't sanction them for following the law. That's why there's been no penalty against that clerk. Okay? So I challenge you to find out from your attorney and call the Bureau of Elections in the morning. Find out what sanction did the city of Memphis endure for honoring my right to assemble that poll book and do an audit. Number two, number one was the data element. So all those columns that you're going to see when you go into your inbox and you open that file, you'll see all these values. It's did the voter vote absentee, did they vote in person, all these things that are cybersecurity risks for anybody to know apparently. Help me understand, help yourself understand why in the world would any of these be excluded from the public view. Transparency. Light disinfects. Keep things in the darkness and the infection will fester. And the infection that's going on in our country right now is like gangrene running through a leg from a sore on a toe. We've let the gangrene get up past our knee. And if we don't stop now, and we don't get our act together, it's going to be real painful to correct it. I would also say, did you folks, any of you, review the attached evidence, so that EPB file? That evidence shows the crimes. I included annotated different colored highlighting on Karen Vermeulen's reports, and it shows all the altering going on with these public records, which are 14-year felonies, up to 14 years. So I will stay here. I will come back tomorrow. I will give you an extension. I want you to be the very first public body that says, this is a big responsibility for me. I'm a public servant to the people of Harrison Township, and I'm going to make sure I make the right decision. And I'm not going to just parrot what the puppet master in the lawyer chair tells me to do. Because you know what? I'm going to want to know from that lawyer, why are you telling us to do this? Why are you advising that we deny this man's FOIA claim if there's a chance we could go to jail? And the woman that did disclose it has had no penalty against her. So why is he putting you through that much legal jeopardy? I would ask him that. Your attorney that you pay all this money to represent you. Well, I'm wondering if he really represents you or if he's representing some other interests. I don't know that to be true, but if I'm in your chair, I'm asking. So I don't know what else I can do. I don't know how much more sincere I can be in my heart. I really want you guys to do the right thing. We need to turn this around. We need to tell people that want to control us and want to rule over us, it's not going to happen in the United States. We're a republic. We have self-governance, and we do have mechanisms. When the system breaks down, there are mechanisms for we the people to abolish it. And it's the purpose of our military, by the way. Many people don't know this. The United States military is a very special function. And when they swear their oath, it's to defend the Constitution and to defend the people of America. Therefore, but they will never take action against a tyrannical regime that's violating our rights if we don't step forward and call it out. It doesn't matter how much they're in disagreement of the violations going on. Our military will never break that oath. They will never go in and do a coup like some of these countries do where the military comes in. However, if we bring just grievances that need to be redressed, we the people, if I go to the base in Grayling or I go to another base and I go to a commander and I show him the evidence that the whole system's broken down, law enforcement won't pursue the crimes, the prosecuting attorneys won't prosecute the crimes, the judges won't convict the offenses, well, we have that mechanism. And as long as I'm alive, I will continue to try to work within the penal code system in the I call it, I won't use that word, but our current system is not really designed to be real supportive of our Constitution, but we all choose to accept that and move our way. So I've decided to stay within the system, provided that the system get its act together. So that's kind of where I stand. So if you'd have told me a year ago or 2 years ago that I'd be standing here doing this in every township meeting and every city council meeting in this county, I would have thought, you're crazy. That's not me. But this is me. And I love this country. I love this state. I've been here my whole life. And I wish the chief was still here because when I worked for the Macomb County Road Commission, I actually held the record in the early 90s. I shoveled 26 ton of asphalt in the potholes in this area in one day. So just, to put a little human side to the story, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you want to engage, but you have all the information. Do you have any questions that you would like to put forth as representatives of the community? No? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Board, I think it may be a good starting point to keep in mind that Mr. Butts is seeking information from 2 elections, and a lot of communities had 2 elections. So when we consider a motion as to how to respond to this, I think it'd be, you could agree that since we didn't have an election on May 2nd, his FOIA denial for May 2nd should be upheld. And it was denied because there's no such information. We had no election. Swinging back to the November 3rd, 2022 election, on January 17th, the Secretary of State sent the clerks around the state an email that said, the electronic poll book from that election may be deleted or erased. You're clear to do that and directed them to do that. Most of the communities did do that. Harrison Township did not do that. For whatever reason, of the precincts in Harrison Township, only number 7 was deleted. So the information that was on the poll book, the electronic poll book from November, still exists for every precinct but 7. As the applicant has stated, under Michigan law, some information is not required to be given up. I don't agree with his assessment. He said he told the Memphis clerk that she didn't have to delete the year or the date of a birth date. The fact is, the year you're born should be disclosed. The date on which you were born should not be disclosed. So what Harrison Township still has is an electronic poll book from November of 2022 with information contained from all the districts, precincts except 1. And then there's a body of law out there that says there's 7 items that don't have to be produced. What the board could consider as a motion is taking hard copies, making a hard copy and redacting those 6 or 7 things that shouldn't be produced, turning it over to Mr. Butts upon payment of the fee that is required to do this. Now, our deputy clerk did the legwork ahead of the meeting tonight to determine the cost to produce all this information to Mr. Butts, and it's $27.75. So what you would be doing is consistent, even with the latest email from the Secretary of State that came on May 10th, and there the Secretary of State said, do not turn over the actual electronic poll book for the reasons that he cited. There's concern about the information there and the protection of that information. It's a specific exemption from FOIA. It does not have to be turned over, but should you decide to grant the appeal in part, it would be giving a hard copy of the information sought, but not the electronic poll book version. Mr. Butts mentioned the Memphis response, and I have that. So the Memphis response did produce, this is a hard copy look at it, a number of the information sought, but also gave it an electronic form, which the community had been directed not to. So I'm available to answer questions on it or suggest a motion should you want one. Yes.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I can certainly tell the appellant that calling somebody a name doesn't score any points with me. I don't think you'd want me to call you a name. I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Huth, and so that's strikes 1 and 2 for me, frankly. Yeah, so I consider you to be a pretty sincere applicant, and you don't look like a rabble rouser, but if you're sitting on this side of the chair, that's a bad way to introduce yourself. Yeah, it's okay. That's golden rule stuff. Sure. I'm not, that's free. That advice is for your benefit, not mine. Yep. This is, I'm in my 15th year on this board of trustees, and I haven't encountered this. So this is clearly not something that happens frequently, at least not in Harrison Township. But, again, using the individual's comments, we certainly look to experts, whether they be our attorney or our doctor, but we use our own common sense. And a part of this process that I'm really not familiar with, it would seem to me from the information that I've been presented that this could be something, for lack of a better word, dynamic. When we talk about, pen and paper, clearly we didn't have electronic poll books. So there may be some things going on here. But my experience, Mr. Huth, is that when there's this sort of a confusion, when there's maybe one municipality sees it this way, there's guidance from the state saying this, I certainly have a lot of respect for Mr. Witt. There's a difference between just blatantly ignoring a FOIA request, right? Just saying, hey, you know what, we just really didn't even respond, or, you know, something where it's pretty obvious that this person is hiding something, versus saying, seems to me like there's a lot of dynamics going on here. So using the individual's reference, using my common sense, 6 months from now, but just say hypothetically, we say, well, we deny this, this FOIA request. 6 months from now, someone determined, well, actually, you should have honored that. But in good faith, we denied it based on what we understood to be the rules at the time. Usually the ramifications that are completely different than someone who denies a FOIA request for no valid reason, or for an obviously very, very flawed reason. In other words, if 27 municipalities in Macomb County were FOIA'd, 26 of them replied, and one didn't, you'd say, gosh, that's kind of not a really good spot to be in legally, right? So I don't know if that's if my comment makes any sense. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're on an island here if we've denied this FOIA along with a lot of other municipalities based on advice that clerks have received. So I don't know if you can comment on that.
From what I've heard, most of the communities have not gone as far as what I have recommended to those communities that have asked for advice. And I would say probably weighed in on 5 or 6 of them here in Macomb County. And it's not the opinion that's shared by all the attorneys. Some are taking a position, and you heard from the appellant tonight that 0's getting produced. I think some can be produced. I'm looking at the Memphis response, so there's, you know, approximately 25 items here that fly right in the face of what the Secretary of State said not to produce, and they don't go to the issue of the heart of the poll book that he's trying to build. So I think that some of these, a vast majority of what he's seeking could be produced, with the exception of the precinct we don't have, with the redactions that we're allowed to make, at a cost that's extremely reasonable, given, I mean, I was frankly surprised that all the time that's going to go into this, that the community believes that $27 is a fair price. That's great. That's reasonable. So to go to your question, if somebody was looking at our response, we would say Memphis produced more, most produced less, and we produced quite a bit here at a very reasonable cost. So I think it's very defendable.
Okay, and then, I mean, so is there some explanation for why, if we have 10 precincts, that one we couldn't produce? I mean, I get that the response to a FOIA is if you ask me for something that I don't have, I can't produce something that I don't have, so I recognize that, but does it lead to the second question, which is, well, how come you can produce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and you can't produce number 7?
Sure. Well, the community was told in January that to go ahead and erase that, and one of the employees was looking at the system and had made a note while talking to somebody else, we could start this process, and erased one and only did one.
Gotcha.
So this was well before any of the FOIAs came in or the thought of it.
Understood. I got you there. So, but you're comfortable in advising us that the clerk's office received written directives from the Secretary of State, I guess,
In January and May, yes.
to delete records.
January to delete, May not to turn over electronic versions of the poll book.
Gotcha. So that advice in May didn't prohibit turning over hard copies that were redacted.
Actually, they have not taken a position, the Secretary of State, on what we're recommending or considering this evening. They're leaving that to local jurisdictions to make up their own mind.
Gotcha.
I have a question. Is it typical that they ask for elections to be erased within like 8 weeks or whatever that time frame was? And then do we keep a hard copy here? Is that how it works? Like,
It's been typical. I imagine that this process is going to be changed because it really wasn't given a hard look until all these, until the issue's been raised. The hard copy, do we have a hard copy of the electronic poll book? I don't know the answer to that. We do for the electionette issue. We can print it, thankfully, except for the one district. The other ones, I'm not aware of it.
so I mean, does the state keep I would think the state would keep records, right? Of our election, if they're telling us to erase ours. I'm just trying to understand the process.
And I frankly don't know what the state has, I'm being honest with
That's
you.
crazy. Okay.
Well, and, you know, by no means do I want to delay this response, but I did hear the appellate express, I guess, my interpretation, a willingness to, you know, hey, if you need to take some time. Don't take this the wrong way, Mr. Huth, but there is a component here that, you know, and again, you know, Adam is the guy who's deciding this. Adam is our clerk, and Adam, I certainly have a lot of respect for Adam, and I know that or Mr. Witt, our clerk, had communicated that he would rather hear this appeal at a time when he's available, but because of his very commitment to take a leadership role within the clerk's organization in the state of Michigan, he's made a commitment to be elsewhere right now. And I don't know how you'd feel. I just wish Adam were here because I would love to hear his side of things, notwithstanding your obvious expertise from a legal perspective.
And I will say that, look, I rely on Adam as well to be able to understand this process. He and I spoke, it seemed like really every day last week about this, but I did tell him that this would be my recommendation. And the reason why I wanted to do that was just because I wanted to make sure it was possible to comply with it. And that's why the deputy clerk has responded that it is possible, as we've discussed, and the costs associated with it. So I do not, if you need more time, of course, that was an offer by the appellee. But I do believe this is consistent with what Mr. Witt's expecting. And I'm just, I'll leave it at that.
Terry, I have a question. Can you remind us what precinct 7 is, what location? Do you think maybe Lowestoft?
I want to say it's Graham.
Grant, okay.
But it appears as if it was, based on the explanation, it was the beginning, the deletion of that data was the beginning of some action, just somebody saying, okay, well, we got direction to delete this. Oh, hang on a minute, maybe we better not do that. So, right, so a little bit of.
I'm just asking because I'm just trying to get my head around which.
Yeah, it's Graham Elementary.
Grant, okay.
Gotcha, okay. All right, well, so board members, we've heard advice from the attorney. Is it possible, Mr. Huth, that at least one motion is in order to deny the request for the May because there is no such data? I mean, is that a part of the appeal process? Is that?
Well, we have to respond to it because it's still out there, so yes, that could be a.
No, and that's okay, but I mean, just for the sake of, you know, making some progress, would it be appropriate to respond to the appeal with more than one motion? Or are you looking for one motion that combines everything?
It's absolutely there's no preference. I could suggest a motion and you guys could take it from there in terms of dissecting it if you want. All right.
But it would seem, at least for the first step, that's an easy one, right?
Oh, so, yeah, do you want, yeah, I get you. You want to make it, I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, I would suggest a motion to uphold
The denial.
the denial of Mr. Witt's determination on the FOIA with respect to the information sought from the May 2nd, 2023 primary.
Because there are no records and there was no such election in Harrison Township.
That's right.
Does everybody understand that? Would anyone be willing to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right,
support
Mrs. Rose, support by Mr. Tominello. And this is an appeal, but in terms of our normal rules that we do when we make a motion, we open the floor for public comment prior to voting on a motion, correct?
Yes.
Right? I mean,
Yep.
this isn't any different because of that.
Correct.
And this appeal, does this require a roll call vote, or is this just a regular, or are you?
Does not
comfortable-
require a roll call vote.
Okay, all right. So we've got a motion with support to deny the May request for information, or to support the denial, I guess is verbiage, because there was no May election, right? So it is our practice when we make a motion, but before we vote, we do open the floor for public comment. That's why we have the on-deck chairs there. So before we might vote on that, if someone wants to speak specifically to the denial or the support of the denial for the FOIA request, we'd open that right now for public comment.
Public comment is monitored.
Yeah, and it's through 3 minutes. So if anybody wants to comment on that request, now you're able to do that. So, and if not, you don't have to. Just May. So if you want to talk about anything other than May, then I'll ask you to sit down.
Thank you, sir. And one quick question. I assume naturally I have nowhere near like the time the gentleman had.
Yeah, we typically limit to 3 minutes. I mean, it's.
Okay, I'll be quick anyway. Before I start, I would like to ask a question of the attorney, if I may. What supersedes, does an elected official like a Secretary of State have the right to violate MCL, whatever the number is? Does the Secretary of State have the right to send out letters violating Michigan law?
And again, I'm just going to tell you right now, if this is about May, we're voting on May.
Oh, I understand. Oh, so I
So
can't.
if you want
I
to
have
talk
wait for
about,
the
if
other?
you want to talk about November, if you want to talk about the
I'll
Secretary of
wait.
State, and not to be rude,
No, no.
but otherwise what happens is we sit here all night with everybody
Okay.
coming up.
So you want me to wait?
Yeah, so if it's.
I'm sorry.
No, and that's what I was trying to say. Like, in the interest of brevity, we're voting on what I think is low-hanging fruit here. I think everybody agrees we're not going to be able to give you anything from May if we didn't literally have an election. So, no, that's okay. Yeah, it's clarification. I didn't make myself clear. That's all right. So if there is no public comment, there's no board comment, we've got a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Tominello to uphold the denial, the FOIA request for the May election because there was no May election in 2023 in Harrison Township. Is everybody clear on that? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now, specific to the request for November, it would seem to me that we've got a couple of options. One is presumably to uphold the denial, right? One would be to, and I guess, although the clerk's office oversees FOIAs, this is like anything, like I know there are certain things that are statutorily the treasurer's responsibility. I can't tell the treasurer to do certain things. I can't tell the assessor to do certain things. The building official has certain rights granted to them because of their education, training, whatever that might be. But the FOIA request is not necessarily the final say of the clerk. If the clerk's answer or response to a FOIA is not satisfactory, then the appeal, we're almost like an appellate body, right? So we have the authority, if I use that word, to direct the clerk's office to respond to a FOIA request in a particular fashion. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
And I think there's really three. You said two, but I really think there's three choices.
Okay.
Deny, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Respond.
some, as I am recommending.
Mhm.
Or really, the third is to produce what the appellant's asking for, and it's an electronic poll book.
Sure. I can say I won't make a motion, as is our practice, but as a voter, as a decision maker, I'm not comfortable, to oppose what the clerk's advice is, what the attorney's advice is, and clearly what, so far, just based on the individual's own words are, everyone else has kind of said. So I can say for one, I'm not in support of saying, to heck with it, just go away and give the electronic poll book, because at least from this point, it doesn't seem like a majority of those people that are giving us advice from various municipalities support that option. So, but you're right, that is a third option that this would be at least a consideration the board would have. It doesn't sound like delaying the decision this evening is one of the options. Is that correct? I mean, FOIA has specific rules on how we have to
Yeah, no,
respond.
you should respond tonight.
Correct. Okay. So I'd be interested to hear from any other board members as to how they feel. It sounds like, I certainly don't want this board to think that there are only three options, but it would seem like those are the obvious ones. We deny, we respond, or we do something in between.
And delaying is not an option.
And delaying, it doesn't sound like is an option. Although I can say I support Mr. Witt's written request to the appellate that clearly having Mr. Witt here to share his insight on this would be valuable to me as a decision maker. So I think it puts me at somewhat of a disadvantage to not have the one guy that we've had in that chair for, since 2012, who's, pretty knowledgeable, respected, and been pretty steady state as a clerk for us during that time.
Mr. Huth, didn't you say you consulted with Mr. Witt, and what was where was he comfortable?
He was comfortable, I said it was doable, and was comfortable with my recommendation.
For the hard copy.
Hard copies,
He was not supportive of releasing the electronic data.
that is 100% true.
Okay. And that's what I understood as well, but I couldn't say that I had the same knowledge about I'm comfortable that he was uncomfortable. I'm content saying that my conversation with him was that he was not he was not supportive of releasing the electronic data. So how about that? So. You know what, I'll do this, you know what, I, because you are the appellate, and I want to respect your time, without having you at the podium, folks can't hear, and so I mean, unless the attorney says otherwise, I don't mind if you want to have a follow-up question.
I apologize. So, I did not receive the explanation as to what elements in that file that you all have, what elements of information are exempt. Right, all that was done, so
Clarify,
Mr.
what you're
Witt,
saying is you haven't received a response for why some of what Memphis gave you was okay and some of it wasn't?
more specifically, I haven't received a legitimate statement from you or from your clerk as to why did I get nothing? Because we all agree that the voter name and everything is not exempt. That can't be cybersecurity. So what I struggle with, and it's probably because I'm not communicating well, I have no understanding as to why no one is addressing that question I'm asking. You're required to give me the non-exempt information in that file. Whether it's a document PDF would save you guys a few bucks on paper, by the way. But I've received it from no one. And I do have another avenue. I can go to court, which I don't want to do, because who ends up paying for it are the people. I don't want the people to pay for that. So why didn't I receive that from Mr. Witt? If he's got all this experience, I would think that he understands that law, that you can't just deny it saying something's in there you shouldn't have, so I can't give you any of it. I guess that's my question I would pose to everyone.
Gotcha. So the question being, if there is a specific basis for denial or an explanation, I deny it based on this.
Well, Mr. Witt's not here, but the answer is, at the end of this proceeding tonight, we will respond fully with an explanation of what's being produced and what is not. So we'll swing this process right to where it's supposed to be.
Right, but in this appeals process, so for this phase of the FOIA appeals process, we ultimately hear an appeal, and we have to take some specific action at tonight's meeting.
Right, and so we take specific action with how we are going to respond to the information sought. But part of the action is not to debate or analyze what the clerk did. We're making a decision of what we're doing tonight. That's your job.
Gotcha. Okay. Is it fair for me to ask, based on other municipalities that you represent, you've had this issue before you in another municipality?
Yes, I've had an appeal with Mr. Butts, and one municipality went to hearing, and then I talked to attorneys or clerks ahead of their board meetings, and
Some other, that's fine.
maybe, I don't really want to name them, but.
No, and I wouldn't ask you. My point is this, you've dealt with this issue in the past. Have any of our peers responded by giving this hard copy as a response?
I have recommended it. I think that Shelby Township I know Shelby Township's offered it. I know that Washington, I shouldn't say I know.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, so the answer is some yes.
Okay, fair enough. And it sounded like, just, although Mr. Butts wasn't at the microphone, it sounded like the hard copy isn't really what he's after anyways, right? So, I mean, if we give a response and it's $27, he has to give us a $27 before we give him the hard copy, right?
I think our policy is $13.
Oh,
Yeah.
but my point is.
I will give you the
Yeah, but it's okay.
It's okay.
If our response is, here, we can give you this hard copy, if he doesn't want it, the burden is on him to say, yes, I do want it, no, I do not.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough.
I did ask for the file, right? But if your appeal or your decision on my appeal is to give me the 244 accounting as to what isn't on there and why, because I already know what's in your poll book because I have it from other jurisdictions. And one in Macomb County, but we have dozens in other jurisdictions. So we know what's in there and what is not exempt by law. So, yes, I'll pay the money. All I ask is that, a PDF portable document format. They just don't want you to give me the Excel file, right?
Yes, right, I have no objection to that.
Yeah, don't kill the trees, just
Okay, that's
just
fine.
give me I'll pay the $27, you just give me that, that'll be fine.
And because I've been trying to be, as accommodating as I can.
I really appreciate it.
At least in your comments, and I'm going to look to Mr. Huth, it sounded like, and you'd indicated you have the expertise in IT and, hey, what's encrypted, but it sounds like the directive that's come from the state was, hey, don't give out the electronic stuff. That doesn't mean you can't give out something else, but the directive that clerks have been given has been to not, there are certain things about that, regardless of what they are, and the directive from the state has been not to give out that electronic file. But if you could give it out in some other format, whether it be a PDF or something else with some things redacted, we don't have directives that we shouldn't do that.
They were silent on that issue.
Gotcha. Fair
And just for the record, Washington Township, the attorney said that, well, you can have PDF, but you can't have electronic.
Right, I got you.
Well, PDF is portable document format. It's electronic.
Oh,
So I couldn't figure that out.
I'm no IT expert, but I got a feeling I understand what you're
But,
talking about.
one more comment I will make as far as going along with the herd. Herds sometimes jump off a cliff. And I'll say one word about the herd mentality. Nuremberg.
Yeah, I hear you, but all I was trying to say was you had said, listen, this isn't, make sure you understand.
Yep.
I won't use the term herd mentality. What I'm saying is 6 months from now when someone says, well, you should have done X. Well, everyone else did X and you didn't do it. That's a much crummier spot to be in than, hey, all
Except in Nuremberg.
the clerks interpreted the direction from the state to do this. So we all kind of thought that way.
And all those Nazi officers said, I pulled the lever because I
Yeah.
had the order. The
I-
reality of it is there's
This
law.
doesn't rise to that, but I.
No, I always like to use extreme examples.
Sure.
To make the point. When you get it too close, it blurs and people don't really see it. But the reality of it is, they're instructing you to violate the law in their policies and procedures, which is why I filed criminal complaints against Jocelyn Benson, Jonathan Brader, and Lori Bourbonnais.
Gotcha.
That's why I have felony. I'm talking to the sheriff's department, they're investigating. And there's also 6 or 7 complaints against clerks and deputy clerks. I don't foresee that happening here because of the thoughtfulness of what you folks have done. I would strongly recommend, though, that you do not delete files. Even if you can decide not to give them up in a FOIA, but don't destroy them. Don't delete those precincts, That would be my advice.
Gotcha.
Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate the time you all spent and the thoughtfulness you put behind it.
All right. Any issues, questions, thoughts? Any board members need information, or is anyone willing to make a motion?
I haven't, I don't, I mean, I wouldn't expect, based on my all over the board answering questions, somebody would have enough information to make a motion. So I would start by maybe suggesting a motion.
Once we make a motion, we always open the floor for public comment before we vote. So keep in mind, we're here to do work. We just have to do it in a fishbowl. But we recognize that sometimes when we choose to vote, somebody in our community, regardless of whether we're voting on a fishing law or a fishing pier or a fire truck, someone may know something that we don't, and so we want the benefit of the input of the public before we take action. But otherwise, this really isn't. This is an incredibly loose format for us, because imagine if you went to work and you were having a meeting and anybody could come into your meeting, it would get pretty crazy. That's what we're doing. We're doing our work right now, so.
My motion for consideration would be that the Selby, or Harrison Township produce a redacted copy in PDF form of the extract from the electronic poll book from the November 8th, 2022 election, with the exception of precinct number 7, and pursuant to exceptions permitted in the GG1, the applicants cited A through F, including an accounting of what is not being produced.
Fair enough. That was almost exactly what I was going to
I
suggest.
will make that motion.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Brado. Is there support?
I support that.
All right, support by Mrs. Rose. Well, we've had a fair amount of discussion. I don't know if there's further board discussion, but we do have a motion with support. And just for the benefit of board members, your conversation, I mean, and I don't wish for you to speak for Mr. Witt, but it is your understanding that Mr. Witt is supportive of that as a response.
Yes, it is.
Right. And I know that, again, as I stated, he wished he could be here, clearly has, ironically, a commitment as a clerk that prevents him from being here, but I do value his opinion, and I think it's important that board members understand that, you know, we're not going to be talking about this a week from now, having them say, that was crazy, I disagree. So, with that, we've had a fair amount of discussion. We can, I'm good with opening the floor for public comment at this time, if you wish to make a comment on the motion.
I'm Sue Vanderberg. I'm from Richmond Township. First of all, I want to really thank you guys for keeping information. I've worked as an election worker for almost 10 years in Warren and in Richmond, and I've worked with the poll book. I know that you back up things on the USB drive, and that is kept separate, so it's not just on the, even if you have to erase the poll book, there's still that USB drive with that information. That is our information. So I really appreciate you, because there are some districts that they don't have the information, and it is law that they have to keep it. And I know you're not going to answer this, but the information that you're going to put in the PDF form, will that include the voter ID numbers, because there is a discrepancy with the voter ID numbers between the county level and the state level? I'm working on the forms right now. In Macomb County, we have like 105 people that have requested their information from the state and at our local levels. And everybody has a different voter ID number, so we want to find out that. And this isn't just us trying to so-called make problems. This is for our state, because everybody knows there's, whether you want to admit it or not, things aren't right. Things are just not adding up. And since we've started with all this electronic stuff, I used to think it was so wonderful. My mom used to say, you know, when all these things came up, you know, she liked to write checks. Oh, Mom, it's so easy, you know, just write them, you know, you can do it on the computer. And now I start to see how it's affecting our our children and what goes on at the school and with the social media, and you can't get away from it at school because then it's it's on the social media. So I think there's just so many things that can be done with electronic stuff, and whether everything is correct at the state level, I hope it is. But that's all we want to know, and if it is, we want to make sure if we have to start over and everybody's on the same plane, that's all we're trying to get at, and it's not attacking or anybody in particular, and that's all I really wanted to say. Okay? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Fortin. I live in Chesterfield. The decisions you make affect everybody in Michigan. That's why I'm here. Recently, I ran for a statewide office inside the Republican Party. I was all over in this early spring, Upper Peninsula, everywhere, spoke to as few as 3 and as many as 400 or 500 people. I've been fighting for election integrity since I realized that the 2020 election was an absolute fraud. There's tons of evidence out there. Elected officials won't look at it. Courts won't look at it. Nobody will look at it. But the American people know, because everywhere I went, I started my little presentation by asking how many people here actually believe, actually know that the 2020 election was absolute fraud, and everybody raises their hand. The citizens know. The citizens of this state, across this whole state, know that these elections are fraudulent. Now, as far as the law is concerned, I'm not a lawyer and I could care less. I can read the law. An elected official does not have the right to break the law. The Secretary of State has no right to tell clerks to delete files where the law says you keep it for 2 years. That's an illegal act. This is what we're trying to do. This is why we can't just FOIA the state. We have to know what's going on. What's my voting record in Chesterfield? I went and got my stuff, but I haven't got the results yet. Okay? So what's happening is the state, a corrupt Secretary of State is changing things at the state level. So you've already had a couple examples. I got a timer here. I'm not going to go, I promise. I appreciate the freedom to speak to you. You guys have been great. You really have. Now listen, I'm getting close though. There's no such thing as ignorance of the law. When we all leave here today, and we got all this on our mind, we're not paying attention, and we're 10 miles over, and we pull over, we get pulled over, or we miss a no turn on red sign. Ignorance of the law is no excuse for a citizen like us. But boy, it's an excuse for the Secretary of State and elected officials. I'm 76 years old and I'm sick and tired of a double standard where one group of people can do what they dang well please, but everybody else, boy, you better toe the line. So the Secretary of State has no right to contact these people and tell them to do something that's against the law. Nothing is more critical than our elections, ladies and gentlemen. What if the 2020 election was, does anyone, elected officials, entertain the thought? Do you know where we're living today? Now we have no energy. A few years ago we did. Now we're in a stinking war that looks like it's never going to end. That never would have happened, but oh no, we had a coup in the White House. Look at the Durham report. I'm a couple seconds over, I'm done. Look at the Durham report. Everybody broke the law except the guy that they're investigating. But now they're indicting him. And no one's indicting the people in the FBI, DOJ, CIA that went after a sitting president for 4 years trying to get rid of him and setting up a fake COVID garbage and all the dang mandates, illegal, unconstitutional mandates that they did in order to control the 2020 election. Thank you again, please, for speaking to you, because I'm not a citizen of this community, but your decisions affect us all. What you guys do here is important. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Get out of your hair.
Thank you.
My name is Barbara Zinner. I live in Harrison Township. And when you've mentioned the law, following the law, over the years, because I keep adding on these decades, the laws have changed. some of the laws have changed, and I'm starting to understand people who say, why has this changed and why is this happening? And it used to be clear, things used to be clear. And so I always question things. Well, I guess I've always questioned things, but I question things now more than ever before. And I really appreciate Mr. Huth going to all the effort that he has, and I realize that's his job, but I really appreciate over the overall exceptional treatment that he's gone through here tonight, and you all also for searching for the truth. And as our laws, I feel, have become changed and blurred, just because one clerk stood up for what she thought was right and believed that, other clerks may be confused because of blurred laws. And when we come down to it, what about the Constitution that is the law of the land? And we all love the Constitution, but do we really read it regularly like we should? Because that really is what is supposed to be clear as crystal. Our laws, they're just, I think some of them are just very confused, and so that makes everything confused. So the fact that you're letting us be here and you're giving us so much thought, I know that there are quite a few, hundreds or thousands of these papers that they have been coming back this way. It's not just a few, and it's quite interesting. And for those to have a 000, 4 zeros, why should that ever happen? That should never happen. That is outrageous. That in itself should make someone say, we should really be investigating what's going on. How can that happen in a free society? Because are we keeping our free society? And that's what this is really all about. Just because, and when you said, Mike said about the books not being let go for 24 months, and now someone's telling you on the phone, you can clean them, you can clear them off in a few months. Who's right with that? So I think things should be more clear than that, I believe. And it would be great for Harrison Township to be carrying the torch for that, which I think is the right thing to do. Because we need to have clarity. We have to have what's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be real quick here. I'm Brian Opry from Shelby Township. And I'm not sure Michael knows this or not, but I was also in the software business for 25 years, a little more maybe. And this directive from the state saying that there's proprietary information on these electronic poll books or anything like that is the lamest excuse I've ever heard.
I'm sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the directive from the state saying that there's proprietary or information on the electronic poll books is absolutely false. There's the data that's being requested is data. It's not software. There's no secret anything in there. It's a spreadsheet essentially. So there's really what they're giving the excuse is absolutely false, and that's all I had really. Other than that, they also have no right to give you directives that violate the law. Obviously, that should be pretty obvious. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. I did make some notes. There's things I heard I might agree with, there's things I heard I might disagree with, but it's public comment, so you can say what you want. The one individual said, we're not here to cause trouble. I believe that. I don't believe the people that are here this evening are here just because they want to have us stay a little later tonight. You don't have to worry about that. The statement was made, everybody knows that things aren't right. Well, I don't know that I agree with that, but I recognize that access, the very nature of FOIA and access to information, gives us the opportunity to find out if everything is right or not. So I can tell you, I can't speak to, there was a comment made about all the zeros. Can't really speak to something that's happening at the state level with some files there because they're not our files. We don't have that. I'm not worried about our information. I'm confident in the work that Adam and the people that he works with do. So the very nature of giving away information or making information available, even if I didn't have confidence in it, clearly you should have access to it. But my point is that when we say, hey, everyone knows things aren't right, I'm pretty confident in saying I think the things that are happening here are right. Whether or not there's other problems at another part in the process, I'm really not qualified to speak to. But if folks want information to be able to try to find that out, it's okay with me, pending whatever legal obligations we have. And clearly, I don't want to violate that either. There was a question that was put forward. Will the data include voter ID numbers? I don't know that answer, and I don't know if you're prepared to answer that.
From what I've been able to check just here, sitting here, I believe the answer is yes.
Okay, all right. And it sounds like from the sum total of what I'm gleaning, the things I've read, the conversations we've had, there's a question as to whether or not this electronic data in its original format can be given out, and I'm not qualified to comment yes or no, but the information contained in that data, we collectively believe should be subject to FOIA and should be available for people to have, which is why we're making the motion that we did. Is that a fair summary?
It would include not every bit of
Not
information.
everything, correct, right.
And
No,
that is a fair summary.
Right, and let's say this, ignoring this whole electronic poll book thing and encrypted data and all this, walking lists are the product of FOIA voter records, right? So what you can give in a FOIA request of voter data and what you can't is really not up for debate. That's long been established. Isn't that a fair statement?
Yes.
Right. It's just a question of, sounds to me like what format is in, right? And I'm not really qualified to say which one it is, but I respect between you, the clerk, that this seems to be a response that hopefully satisfies the requester. So, any other comments? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Brado with support by Mrs. Rose. I didn't write it down. And should we restate that motion just for the record since it's been some time, or?
I think we can go forward with it.
It's part of the record?
Yeah, I'll get
Yeah.
it. I'll help you before we leave.
Okay, good. Is everybody clear?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, good. Well, thank you for your time and attention, and hopefully we made some progress here on that. Now is our policy. Item H is public comments. Those public comments can be about any subject that you wish. And we ask that you try to limit those to 5 minutes in length.
I'm just going to clarify what you had said. What I meant about that is just what's going on in our world.
I got you.
Not
no.
personal, I don't mean this area. I mean just the craziness.
Sure.
That's all I mean. So
enough.
just wanted to clarify that so I don't offend anybody.
Yeah, well, and I apologize. We don't normally get into a back and forth, but if
No,
we're talking about elections,
You can take that. Right.
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, no problem.
Board members, residents, C. William Bardell, 26-year resident, clean cut, do-gooder boy next door, clean up, fix up, people helping people. Just want to remind everyone, real quick, check out Save Lake St. Clair, Facebook, follow, keep up to date on everything that's going on. And other than that, everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Is there any further board comment? Hearing none, we do have a closed session, item I. And again, typically, we do take the public comment beforehand so that everybody doesn't have to stick around to the end of that. But our next agenda item is a closed session, so at this time, we'll call for a recess to clear the room and go into closed session. Mr. Huth, I'm sorry, I actually have to we do have to make a motion to go into closed session.
We would need a motion and a roll call on that, please, yes.
Correct, yep. So, the proposed, closed session is to discuss five-star outdoor media versus Harrison Township. I'd be looking for a motion to enter into closed session, to discuss, that case.
So moved.
All right, all right, we got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, that does require a roll call vote, so it was made by Brian with support by Larry.
Mr. Badkins?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Ogiatis excused. Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Witt's excused. Mr. Verkowski?
Yes.
Sure.
Do you have a sign on the door?
Yeah, I'll get it.
Do we have?
Ready? All right. Board members, I'd be looking for a motion to enter into open session at 9:45 PM.
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there support?
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Brado to enter into open session. Discussion on the motion, board members. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, it does require a roll call vote. Mr. Badkins made the motion and Mr. Brado seconded it.
Mr. Badkin?
Yes?
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Olgiati's excused. Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Witt's excused. Mr. Verkest?
Yes. Board members, we did have a closed session to discuss five-store outdoor media versus Harrison Township. Is there a motion from closed session?
Make a motion to proceed as discussed in closed session.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Tominello. Is there support?
Support.
All right, got a support by Mrs. Rose. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, I don't believe that requires a roll call vote. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The only other thing is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.